Yeah. Let's go to Isaiah 2 and 4. Let me look at that right quick. There's three places. Isaiah 2 and 4. He shall judge among the nations and shall rebuke many people. They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. Okay, here's something interesting. Flo did a live feed earlier, right? And he went to the parable of the sower. In the parable of the sower, you don't get a lot of, in my opinion, you don't get a lot of millennial kingdom passages in there because Jesus straight up tells you there's going to be a harvest of the good and the bad, and the wheat's going to be thrown into the barn, and right. And I wanted to get on there and tell him, well, Jesus says, I have a lot more things to tell you that you will not understand right now. And so after the Spirit comes on the apostles, then they start talking. However, let me tell you this. A lot of people say that the millennial kingdom belief system starts with an interpretation of Christianity. And here's where I'm going to differ at. It's actually a Judaistic belief system that a messianic age would come. It's called the Olam Haba, the age to come. And it would be an age where, Israel is ruling the nations with a righteous Davidic king. The only difference is when people say it's a new belief system is because the Christians put Jesus there, right? So these nations here, beating their hooks into plowshares and all that. I'm gonna go to another verse. I have three that I want to look at. Micah 4:3. Let me bring that up. And he shall judge among many people, and he shall judge among, and rebuke strong nations afar off, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nations shall not lift up. Same Isaiah verbatim, same stuff. And my last one I want to go to is Joel 3:12. Okay, let the heathen be wakened and come to the valley of Jehoshaphat, for there I will sit to judge all the heathen round about. Okay, with the two verses that I just mentioned, Isaiah and Micah, I'm questioning if someone says, let's go through a couple different ways of reading this. If someone says you have to look at this through the lens of the New Testament, okay, let's look at it. Where in the New Testament is an example of this given that this has been fully realized or fully fulfilled? Because I can't find one. Now, if you say when Jesus comes back, it's going to be no millennial kingdom, straight eternal state or something like that, how do you explain the nation is bleeding their, into plowshares and there's going to be no war? How do you explain that? And so their counter to me is, well, you don't really believe that yourself because you have a belief system where there is going to be war because after the 1,000 years, Satan is released and Gog and Magog come, right? So in a sense, they'll say, well, yeah, the passage says they'll beat their swords into plowshares and pruning hooks. And then they'll say, well, if you believe in the millennial kingdom, then you still believe there's going to be war. But here's the difference, though. Here's the difference. It's not the nations necessarily rising up against Israel. It's Satan leading his armies of unbelievers or whatever it is against the millennial kingdom. So you got to be careful because people will try to trick you. And they'll say that. They'll say, oh, well, you do believe there's going to be war because after the millennial kingdom, there's going to be war. Right? And so the only way I got out of that is to say, well, the passages Isaiah 2:4 and Micah that I bring up, it doesn't mention Satan at all. It just mentions nations. Like in the Revelation, after the 1,000 years that Satan's released, it don't mention it mentions Gog and Magog, but we see from the reading it's Satan leading the armies. There's some other passages like I think it's Isaiah 60. I asked them to explain this to me. Isaiah 60, 65:20, where it says, "Thou shalt be no more since an infant of days, nor an old man that hath not filled his days. For the child shall die at 100 years old, but the sinner being 100 years old, when he dies, shall be accursed." Now, I don't know how to even allegorize that for an understanding of how do you make sense. And they'll probably say, well, what's the context there? If you go back and look at the context of the chapter, it in my reading, it's speaking of the Messianic age. You know, the lion laying with the lamb, all these things you have here. And what's going on with Isaiah, because Jeremiah picks back up off Isaiah when he's talking about the new covenant and all that. Well, what Jeremiah before that talks about rebuking all the Davidic kings. They're not good. They're bad. Jeconiah just got the curse on him. So write this man off childless, all these things. Right. And so when you get to some of these passages, it's like what an amillennialist or a post-millennialist will tell you is that upon Jesus' return, it's straight destruction. And then the kingdom, right? But
Yeah.
I'm having a hard time fitting that in the timeline.
Yeah, so I think I guess where they would defer as far as new heavens and new earth, they would think that the second coming of Jesus Christ, that's the great white throne. That's when um, all the nations are pretty much wiped out, right? But right here in Isaiah 65, it says, "Behold, I create new heavens and a new earth," right? So the question is, when does that happen? Does it happen when Jesus Christ comes back, or when after the millennial reign? But the thing is, though, is in verse 20 where it says, the sinner at 100 years old shall be accursed. So even sinners are going to be known to live a lot longer than we do now. So that's where I think there's conflict there.
Well, I think there's some more conflict if you go in Revelations. It says, what does it say? All the dogs and the something are outside the gate, right? Or the Gentiles are outside the gate. I don't know how they're reading that. You know, if I don't understand how they're reading that as an eternal state for me, because and there's another thing Carlos Xavier brought up, and Isaiah 51:16. Now, Carlos, when he reads Isaiah 51:16, if you go look at that verse, he's talking about Yahweh's talking about putting his words in someone's mouth, that through that person he plants the heavens and the earth, right? So when we talk about a new heavens and a new earth, right? Sometimes I don't know, I could be wrong on this, but I don't know if that's a literal new heavens and new earth or just the way the structure is. Like, for instance, let me give you an example. A new heavens could be Jesus with authority over the angels. Okay. And so a new earth could be, you know, how a king, when he comes into power, he reforms things. So I don't know if the new heavens and the new earth is literal or some kind of metaphorical language is. Like, for instance, let me give you an example. A new heavens could be Jesus with authority over the angels. Okay. And so a new earth could be, you know, how a king, when he comes into power, he reforms things. So I don't know if the new heavens and the new earth is literal or some kind of metaphorical language. That's where I'm kind of hanging up right there. But I do.
So it could, go ahead.
You go ahead.
I was just going to say it could be kind of correlated with how we also, how our mortal bodies will put on immortality. It's not that we're like totally wiped off; we're just changed.
Exactly.
You know.
So I sent you some verses earlier, and it seems like there's a typology between with the millennial reign, and there's a restoration process with the earth and the new heavens. For whatever reason, I don't know this for sure. I don't know why, but I think I can know. I think I can understand why. Because for us to really properly have dominion over the earth, we would have to be created new, because we fell from the beginning when he said, "I give them dominion." We weren't good stewards of the earth, right? And it also
Right.
says that he's going to destroy those who destroy the earth. So God really cares about his creation, even the earth and, things like that. So before we can be good stewards of the new creation, new heavens and new earth, we would have to be renewed. So I could see why, he would restore us first before he would restore the earth, right? I mean, it kind of makes sense to me. I'm not saying that's a definite reason, but it's definitely something to think about. But there does seem to be a redemption process with creation. I think that's why it says all of creation groans for the manifestations of the sons of God, because it's a sign to creation that even creation's time of redemption is drawn near as well. So I'm not saying that the trees talk and all that, have all that stuff, but I think it's just like a metaphor or whatever. But you have the 1,000-year millennium reign, and it's not restored or anything like the earth is not fully restored or anything like that. But it seems like to me that after the great white throne judgment, that's when there's a new heaven and a new earth.
Wait. Let me build off what you're saying. You're saying, okay, that's beautiful, that humanity has to be fixed first, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
To me.
That makes a lot more sense, because in certain part of Revelations we see a temple and all this, but if you keep reading in Revelations, there is no more temple. There is no, and so for me, what you're saying, because remember when Adam fell, the earth was cursed, the ground was cursed. So yes, creation needs to be restored. However, does that mean it has to be destroyed? I don't think so.
I think it would be more like how we are restored. We're given a new body. We're changed. It's like Jesus when he was resurrected. He didn't fully like hit the way he looked. There's some scriptures that seem like he looked different, but I think maybe he could just manifest in certain ways. That didn't seem like, oh, that's Jesus just by looking at him. But when he was appearing to them, he would look like himself. He would have the marks and everything on him. So maybe that's how the earth would be as well. After the great white throne judgment, because it seems like there's like how we are. The old has passed away, right? So like right here in Revelation 21, it says, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first and the first earth had passed away, and the was no more. And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared, and so it seems like that's how our process is right now. So the old man has passed away, like Paul says, behold, all things have come new. We are a new creation, all who are in Christ, but we haven't fully put on immortality.
Correct.
So it's kind of the same thing. So after we put on immortality, those who partake of the first resurrection, now there's a process for the earth to, this is all new. This just came to me today.
No, that makes a lot more sense with the millennial reign, because when he says the nations that don't come up and pay tribute to the king, they will get no rain. So technically it's telling you there, they still need rain to grow their crops and all these things. God's not really providing for them unless they cooperate.
Yeah.
So yeah, keep going with that, because that makes a lot. I'm going to add that to my thinking as well.
Yeah, that actually just came to me earlier when I messaged you as I was reading. Also, I think it was in Revelation 20. I sent you. You were mentioning there will be no temple, for every tear, and death shall be no more. See, that's the thing too. If so, like we were reading before in Isaiah. Was it Isaiah? 60,
Yes.
it said that that there will still be death. It will just be, our lives will be prolonged as far as the sinner and the baby. So there will still be technically death in the millennial reign.
Yes, and so that still goes with God allowing the wicked to grow with the just. The rain falls on the wicked and the just. Because in the eternal state, I don't see any wicked at all. Period. I
Yeah,
don't. Yeah.
because the last enemy is death.
hmm And hell. So death, Satan, and hell are all thrown into the lake of fire. That means there's no more enemy. It's no.
And yeah, and it also says that he was after the 1,000-year reign, um, when he stirred up the nations again, he was thrown into the lake of fire where the false prophet and uh, the false prophet and I don't forgot the exact term they used, but
The beast.
the beast was thrown, but it was like past tense.
Right.
So
So if you take the beast as some system here, fine. We'll take the beast as a system. Then if you don't believe in a millennial reign, and you think this beast was already thrown into this fire, then it makes more sense our way to say that Gog and Magog that Satan's bringing. That's why the passage says the beast is already in the fire, because that worldly nation that came up against, I guess you would say World War III. You know what I'm going at? That's all those nations are in, but then people would say, well, then how did some people survive into the millennial kingdom? I don't think everybody's going to be against Israel, but that doesn't mean they're all believers.
yeah, well, the Bible explicitly names some nations that will not be against. Well, not necessarily that it won't be against Israel, but they won't. They will escape from the hand of the beast. Who is persecuting. So they could still not like Israel or whatever. But the same thing with the United States. There's a lot of people here that don't like Israel, but as a country, we've always used our NATO, our veto power to protect Israel, and we've used it like I don't know something like 40 times to protect Israel already. But I wanted to get to, I think it was Revelation 21. So you mentioned no temple. I saw no temple in the city, for its temple is the Lord God, the Almighty, and the Lamb. And the city has no need of sun or moon to shine on it, for the glory of God gives its light, and its lamp is the Lamb.
Right. So that's after the passage. I have to go look, but it said one of the passages says there's Gentiles on the outside, but right here, that ain't. There's no talk of that. Let me see if I can find that passage in Revelations 11:2. Right. It says it mentions the temple, and this person's measuring the temple, but he says on the outside of the temple, on the outside, the court which is without the temple, leave out. It's given unto the Gentiles, right? It's given unto the Gentiles. But the passage you just read, in my reading, it's further in time from that Revelations 11:2. There is no temple, right? So I don't know how they get around some of these readings by saying, well, your body's the temple. Okay, I get the allegory, but you need to make sense of some of these passages with your allegorical interpretations. I'm not saying our body ain't the temple, but when you allegorize it, at least make it make sense for me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the problem. And that's why I made the comment once that it kind of sounds like I'm arguing against Trinity, because it's kind of like something that's you can't pin it down anywhere. You can't. It's just you're battling something that's a kind of a imaginary, and kind of reading into things where there's no way to understand it. It's just oh, I guess it's too much of a mystery to understand.
But at least with our view, if it's, and I don't want to say this wrong, but it fits more in line with the Jewish way that they probably possibly would have been thinking. But then someone else could counter and say, well, the way they were probably thinking is that everybody was going to be resurrected at the same time, or the resurrection. That's why Paul, a lot of the times when Paul says, it's the end, it's become, because for them, there was going to be an eschatological resurrection. However, the difference was it was Jesus. So now all the apostles are like, oh, we're about to go next. We're about to go next, but it wasn't time. So yeah, it's a mystery, but here's the deal. It's semantics with the grammar, because if you go to Revelation 20, it's either says what it says and it's 1,000 or it's thousands. What is it?
Well, I think that's kind of like the ECOT argument to me personally.
Yeah, exactly.
And I looked it up because after they said it, I wanted to go see, because I'm open to it. I'm not claiming I know everything, but it has to make, to me, it has to make sense. I think that there was a time where this stuff didn't make sense. So like even the Jews, they weren't wrong about the Messiah coming and putting down the kingdoms. They weren't wrong about that. They were wrong about the time. They were wrong how God was going to do it. And so, because we know that Jesus Christ, everything's going to be put down by him, and every principality, power, all the kingdoms of the earth, everything's going to be subjected to him. The earth is God's footstool, that kind of thing. But so it's not like, that's why it's kind of hard, because everybody has a little bit of truth in what they're saying.
Right.
And even 50% is a lot.
It's a lot.
So it's very hard to have a conversation about it, and kind of people just keep throwing things out there that go to whole different topics, and because this is a big topic. This is
huge.
This is a big topic, and there's so many subjects within it, and so but another thing too, I think I brought this up to you, but in Revelation 20, I think verse 4, it says, "Then I saw thrones, and seated on them were those to whom the authority to judge was committed. Also I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded for the testimony of Jesus, the word of God. They didn't worship the beast or receive the mark. They came to life and reigned with Christ for 1,000 years." So this is the first resurrection. And so if this happened already, if the Antichrist already came and it was AD 70, then the apostles and they would be alive right now.
Well, the way they try to get out of that, right, is that they'll say that they are resurrected and they are with Christ right now, and that is why you see Christ returning with a myriad of angels and saints. Those are the saints. That's
okay. I get that. So here's my thing. There's too many places where it talks about the dead being raised, and also not all the apostles. I don't think all of them were dead at that time. John was alive already.
Exactly.
John was alive till 80, 90 something.
Yeah, so all we have is church father tradition of how they died. We don't really know who was alive. We don't. Right. And that's a good argument.
To pin a date down on the when the apostles died, I think is pretty impossible.
Well, another argument they're trying to use is that they have to have most or all of the New Testament writings happen before 70 AD. And there's just some dating that doesn't line up with all the writings happening before 70 AD.
Yeah, and this is where I'm standing right now, as far as us who are returning with Christ. I'm not sure exactly what that means, if we're literally going to be coming from heaven, or if we're meeting him as he's coming down. It says it's going to be like a twinkling of an eye. So it's for any of us to say we know exactly how that's going to happen, even Paul said that we do not know yet what we will be. So it's very hard to pin that down. So I can see where they're coming from with that, but I think it's very, very assumptuous.
Well, so can I, but here, now we're getting into this part. For them to say that, that's only dead people. But Paul speaks of people that's alive and dead. And for me, now we get into the language of the harpazo, the rapture. And so people don't like to talk about that. I have my views on it. They have a couple views on it. But if Paul is talking about people being caught up with Christ, not just dead, but alive too. Right? So that's my defense. If they say, well, yeah, that already happened. All the apostles are resurrected with Christ. Or what about the ones that were alive?
Yeah, yeah. And John was, I mean, according to history, John was alive still for sure. The other ones, I'm sure one of them was alive because that
And then
was like 20
we
some
got
years before John.
we got the two witnesses. We got a lot of events that I just don't see how they've already happened. Especially if you think history in biblical history happens cyclically, which I do. I wouldn't end it at 70 AD. I would say something more dramatic and worldwide is going to happen. You know, because 70 AD affected mostly the Jews. This one coming is going to affect everybody.
Yeah, and they will. Like one of them agreed with me about the Holy Roman Empire, for example, but that didn't happen until 800 AD.
Yeah, right.
So it's like that's definitely way off on timeline by hundreds of years. But um, you know, as far as like us coming back, there's somewhere in scripture, I'll pull it up. It talks about there's going to be 30 minutes of silence in heaven.
Exactly.
I believe that this is the time we are going to be with the Lord and God. So just think about Jesus, right? Now, when I say we are not created to reign with Christ in heaven, I'm not saying that we will never experience or go there. But what I
agree with you.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that we're not to reign there. The earth was created for us to rule on it and God to be with us, to dwell with man. It even says that here in Revelation 21 that the Lord God dwells now with man. And so, but I'm not saying that we won't experience heaven. But what I am saying is that I do think that I see it highly possible that we should experience the same thing that Jesus did. He said, I have not yet ascended to my Father. So he was resurrected, but he wasn't ascended yet in a literal sense, I guess you could say.
Well, me and Flo went back and forth on this because he brought me to the passage where he says, "Don't touch me yet; I've not ascended to my Father." And he took it as Jesus is leaving then. And I was like, well, I don't take it right there. I take Jesus actually ascending in Acts. And so his position was that Jesus comes and goes many times. And in Acts is his final farewell. And I disagreed with that, of course. But yes, there is a passage in the Old Testament that says that the heaven was made for God, man was made for the earth, period. So whatever you take heaven to be, which there is another definition, heaven is anywhere God dwells. So your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So wherever God is, that's heaven, period. Now, if you want to take it as a location, well, guess where it is? It's the heaven of heavens. It's behind the veil. And in a spiritual sense, you're there with Christ, right? But you're right. I agree with you. I don't think we'll be ruling and reigning in the heavens where I don't see that.
Yeah, I think it's I don't think that. I think that's tradition. It doesn't even seem right when people say it. I was hearing people preach it the day at church, and they're like, "Oh, we're going to heaven." It just don't seem like reality to me. Any of this you could say that don't seem like reality, but as far as like it making sense, like I don't believe that God has changed his plans on earth and his creation. He has a plan to restore it now, and so that's the way I see new creation with us and with the earth. And I believe that the 30 minutes of silence in heaven, that's the only thing that makes sense to me right now is while he's pouring out his wrath, the seven bowls on those who took the mark of the beast and this and that. So this has to be at the end of the Great Tribulation because I'm talking about the wrath, God's wrath, his bowls. They're poured out.
The wormwood, all of it.
Wormwood. Are you talking about the trumpet, or are you talking about the bowls?
Oh, you're talking about. Well, that's a good question too. Some people take them as different things. Some people take them similar things described differently.
Yeah, I think they're different. Okay. The trumpets, I believe, is more of a longer period. It doesn't all happen within uh, the 7 year period that a lot of people believe is the start of the Great Tribulation. I actually think the Great Tribulation is only actually at 3.5 years because it gives us the amount of days and months and all that multiple times. So, but it
Right,
talks
because there's a peace treaty for 3.5 years. So, yeah.
and that's why we can speculate and we can say, oh well, we've been saying this for years, but I just see too many things lining up right now, and the whole Abrahamic covenant thing that's happening right now, the third temple, and they're like, oh well, we are the temple. It's like, okay, I get that. That's us. We're
That's us. Yeah.
but Satan still has a whole earth to deceive. So it. But
They got Yanuka over there right now, that rabbi. They got 5 red heifers, and all they're doing is waiting. I guess I've seen the Pope and the Muslims and the Jews getting together. So yeah, I'm one of the readers that reads the Antichrist will appear once they build that temple. I read it that way. That's what I'm with. I could be wrong.
Well, when has after the temple, like Flo, he said, how great of a how great of a time was it, in a bad sense, right? That the temple was destroyed. I mean, it's a great time in history, Yes, that's true. But also, if you're going to say that, you also have to say that if the third temple is built and it's built during your lifetime, you also have to agree that that's a great time in history.
I would say greater because back then the known world was really that part of the world. Now, if that happens, the whole world, I'm talking, we have the technology now, we'll be informed. I'm talking cataclysmic, the whole world. So if he believes in cyclical events, this would be a grandiose, so big, it's the great deception.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's literally the whole earth now. Before, a lot of times they use the word world for like the people in the country or the area, but now it's literally the whole world.
It's literally the whole world.
Yeah, and we'll all be tuning in. And I think that as time goes on, people are going to have to start coming to grips and deciding, look, the Bible's talking about this stuff. And, for the last 100 years, I've been hearing, oh, he's coming back. He's coming back. Peter said they're going to say in the last days, where is your promise of his return? You've been saying this forever. So that's what's happening right now. And then seeing a temple rebuilt, you seeing animal sacrifices resuming, the prince and Daniel stopping the sacrifices. I mean, your people are going to. I think there's going to be I think faith is going to be really high at some point when we start seeing these things unfold. And I think that the way they used to walk back in those days in the first church is going to start happening again, and it's going to be a short period of time. Because man has proven that they can't handle great power and the way we are. We can't handle it. We always abuse it.
And so let me ask you this: do you think that the war in heaven has already happened, and the great deceiver, the accuser of the brethren, has been cast down?
Man, you know what? I used to. I'm really starting to believe that he's going to be cast down, because it says the angel warns the earth. It says, "Woe to the earth, for the devil has come down to you with great wrath, because he knows he has but a short time." So I believe that that's the actual 3.5 year period where the persecution against Jerusalem and Israel and the church is going to happen, because and I believe that's the Great Tribulation. I believe God's wrath is at the end of the Great Tribulation. I believe the devil's wrath is the 3.5 years when he reveals himself.
And he tries to get the world to take the mark and to worship the beast in its image. Because Titus didn't do that. Titus didn't do that, did he? He didn't make the Jews. I mean, he just tried to destroy their temple. He didn't set up an image. And some people will say that he did, but He didn't do what the text is saying. In my opinion, there's going to be an image, a false prophet. I mean, where's all these in 70 AD? Who's the false prophet?
Exactly. And that's the thing, that the Holy Roman Empire didn't exist. And they would at least agree with me on that. People can disagree on the Holy Roman Empire, but you're still going to have to give me a false prophet. Um, and so some people believe it's Muslim. I actually talking with a guy.
Mm.
He's presenting his. He has some good points. He has some really good points. It still doesn't line up with me. It's hard for me to believe that the Muslim nation is, and I know that they have in their region, but they're too dogmatic in my opinion. I think that the only way to deceive the whole world is to have interfaithism and the one world religion. That's the way you really deceive the earth.
That's it. Coexist.
Yeah, it's the angel of light
Mm-hmm.
that the devil appears as, and that it says that the false prophet will appear as a lamb, but will speak as a dragon. So
Right.
he will look like religious and whatever and godly, but he's going to speak with a great deception.
Now, let me ask you this: does I can't remember, but does the false prophet do wonders, or just the Antichrist? Does he do signs and wonders too, or just the Antichrist,
I think it's just a false prophet.
or just the false prophet? Okay.
Because I think it's the false prophet that causes people to believe in him, and then he points people to the Antichrist.
Is he the one with the 3 frog-looking spirits come out of his mouth?
Yeah.
All right.
I'll visit that again, but that's from my understanding right now. But I could have been wrong, so I'll take a look at that.
Right.
But
and I'm not saying because I know they say at the cross Satan is bound, but I don't get that reading. I know Satan is stripped of all his dignity, and he's stripped of everything that he thought he was going to do. However, I don't see him bound. And then what you're saying really is man is this evil that Satan doesn't even have to be around, and we're this evil. And I don't really, even me being Calvinist, whatever, we're not going to go into that, but you don't have a Satan around, and man is this evil.
yeah, and it talks about in Revelation 20 verse 6. It says, over the people who blessed is and holy is the one who shares in the first resurrection. Over such the second death has no power, but they will be priests of Christ. So then you have to ask, like, okay, so then what about these people that are living and walking with lions? Babies are going to lay down with, but there's still death happening. I don't. To me, it doesn't. It doesn't add up to me.
Not in a linear timeline, no, because they have Christ just returning, wiping things out in an instant, and then the eternal state. That's what they have. And I have, Christ coming back and perfecting humanity, and then Satan is released to test perfected humanity, just like in the garden, just like with Adam. You're tested when everything. That's the thing. We've been tested this whole time when the earth is bad. But imagine the test you go through when everything is good. Eve didn't know no better. Everything Eve experienced was good. She did not know what evil was. Imagine her being deceived, because it ain't like she was a bad person, but everything that she experienced was of God. So how could she just didn't listen to Adam. But other than that, everything she experienced was good. That's the true test for me.
Yeah. So I think, when I was reading this morning, Revelation 2021, I feel like I got some understanding of what the millennial reign is about. And there could be some reasons why we also have to go through it as well, the millennial reign, even as immortals. I don't know the answer for that for sure, but definitely the people who are allowed to. So in Book of Daniel 7, it says that the nations that were in the earth when Jesus Christ comes back, they're going to be allowed to continue for a time. they're still so basically what they believe is the nations that are allowed to continue for a time that's now. Like we're continuing for a time right now. That's what. Yeah.
Yeah, but Jerusalem's not the top dog. And so in Daniel, it would be Jerusalem would be the top nation. Another thing you got to ask yourself is that passage where he says we will judge the angels. Okay, well, if you take the Genesis 6 incursion, that angels came and had sex with humans. So what you were saying, the man has to be, his status has to be above an angel to judge an angel, right?
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so that only would happen for me after the millennial reign, after the last war. The testing has been done, and those that made it now have that high status. They've been tested, and now they can judge angels, depending on how you read that text.
Yeah, and it also says when he's it seems like it's a very short time when Satan is released again after the 1,000 years, and he's cast into him along with death and Hades, the grave, is cast into the lake of fire where the beast and the false prophet were. So
Right.
yeah, that's the thing. They would have to pinpoint, okay, so when did the mark of the beast happen? They might say, oh, it's just a system. If you believe in the system, then that's
Yeah, but then that don't even make sense because you got the system already in the lake of fire, and now Satan's going along with all these people he got to fall away. So is there two systems, or what's going on?
that's a good point. Yeah. Yeah, because if the beast was the system and he was thrown in the lake of fire, then there's a 1,000 year period, a gap, and then he comes back, and now Satan is another system, I guess, and thrown into.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. The timeline for me is just all their timeline is all jumbled up, and when you ask them detail, you got to have your details there. He some people address the Euphrates drying up, but there's a prophecy about the Red Sea the Dead Sea giving life, things like that. All those things would have to be allegorized for them. But if you're gonna, and I don't have no problem with an allegory, but you have to explain it in a way that it makes sense in the time period.
Yeah, in the same way, like, how we can say we are all who are in Christ are a new creation, right? Old things have passed away.
Yeah.
But we haven't, but we know also that, it hasn't come to full realization as far as us putting on immortality either.
Right.
So
we have a down payment.
yeah, so we can all agree that has not happened yet. So that's how you can have both. You can have the physical part and understand the spiritual part as well.
In my opinion, there won't be no gifts of the Spirit anymore when the perfect comes. And for me, the perfect is when Jesus is reigning. So
Right.
that's the reason. I don't see how they get out of that. So and that's why they have to go full cessation. Because if you have gifts today, it's because in some form or fashion, the perfect hasn't come. And so they got real problems on that passage. And a lot of them will interpret it as the perfect came because the perfect is the canon. Well, if you go with the perfect being the canon, well, you still have a lot of explaining to do.
Right. Yeah, because we know in part, and
Bingo.
Part everything, because we're looking through a darkly lens. I can't say that we. Look at what we're doing. We're debating all these things still. We won't be doing that, and we would not be doing that. We would be fully. We would fully understand just as He fully knows us. It's everything's going to be revealed at that time.
Well, it says he rules with a rod of iron. Well, if he's ruling with a rod of iron today, you got some problems there, because in the Bible, when it says that, I think it really means that. Ruling with a rod of iron. It says under two witnesses, Moses you were put to death. All right. So all this talk that Jesus is going to come back and he's the warrior king. I agree with that, but you have him not ruling with a. Why would you rule under nothing but believers with a rod of iron? That don't make sense to me. You're ruling with a rod of iron because people have the capacity to step out of line.
Yeah. Yeah, man, super interesting stuff, man. I appreciate you coming on, but man, yeah, this was great.
Yeah.
Maybe, man, if we didn't get into feasts or um, there was another. You were gonna talk. Oh no, that was your typology. Was it the feast?
It's going to be the feast, but I mean, these are going to have to be because I can go so long. Another reason why I believe people can't dwell where Jesus is. If he's the high priest, well, only the high priest was allowed in the Holy of Holies. Of course, you can't go there. But yes, so there were so many things, but the topic is so huge. It's going to be more than just an hour. But I like having the discussion with you. Okay.
Yeah. So then I have unlimited with that.
All right. Yeah. But there's a lot of typologies. I didn't bring up Solomon's kingdom. I didn't bring up lots of things.
That was really the original reason. But it was great that I think this was a great discussion.
Right. I mean, we didn't even go into the nations, the kingdom of the north, the kingdom of the south, the 10 heads. I mean, there's so much, bro. So much.
The 10 heads is a fun one. I like that one.
Right.
But
our Rome getting the head wound, or whatever you call it, was so much.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. Have you ever heard that before? That most Christians agree. They'll say he fulfilled it all, but they'll backtrack and they'll go, well, he still got to fulfill the fall feast. Have you heard that before?
No. See, that's something that's new to me.
Yeah. Yeah. So they'll say he fulfilled Passover. He fulfilled unleavened bread. He fulfilled first fruits. They're iffy on atonement because, like I said, the priest has to come out of the tabernacle to the people, which he hasn't done yet. So they'll say he fulfilled first fruits because he's the first resurrected. But now God will fulfill the rest of it because usually with first fruits is I guess you could say he fulfilled first fruits. He's the first stop. But other than that, now we have tabernacle. He fulfilled Pentecost on Pentecost, right? And so the disagreement comes in with tabernacles. He's going to come dwell. That's what I was getting at.
Yeah, if you want, man, we'll do that next.
All right, bet.
But yeah, I told my wife I was only gonna be 30 minutes.
Sorry, bro. Sorry, I kept feeling like I was ducking and dodging with these kids, and I finally got a hold of you.
Oh yeah, no, it's all good, man. I get it. All right. Yeah, man. Salute. Thank you for tuning in, guys. I appreciate it. You guys have a blessed day. Tune in for the next one.